Good evening, everyone. I'm Poppy Harlow in tonight for Aaron Burnett. And out front this evening, breaking news, a stunning series of statements tonight from the president about Bob Mueller's investigation. Reuters just posting an interview moments ago with the president. And here's what the president said, and I quote, "I've decided to stay out of the Mueller investigation. Now, I don't have to stay out. As you know, I can go in and I could do whatever. I could run it if I want." Let that sink in. I could run it if I want, an investigation into the president. That's right, suggesting that he could run the special counsel's entire probe. Now, a probe that is investigating not only him, but his campaign and his associates. The president also echoing his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, saying that speaking to the special counsel and his investigators could be a, quote, perjury trap. This comes as sources tell CNN the president is unnerved by the stunning revelation that the White House counsel, Don McGahn, has been cooperating extensively with the special counsel's team, 3 interviews lasting 30-plus hours. Out front tonight, Jeff Mason, the Reuters reporter who broke this story. Jeff, you spoke to the president just moments ago. There are a lot of headlines here. So let's begin with this bombshell, that the president told you, I could run the Mueller probe if I wanted to.
Yeah, that was one of the more interesting things that he said in the interview with me and my colleagues Steve Holland and Jim Oliphant. He talked about the probe. He said again that it was a witch hunt. In fact, he interrupted us when we started the question to be clear that that's how he viewed it. But I mean, this quote is getting a lot of attention with good reason. But he actually, the run up to that quote is he said he was staying out of it and that it was better if he did. So it's interesting. He was making it clear that he viewed it as a decision. And that he had made the decision to stay out, but it wasn't the only option that he had. Right.
You know, he's also long said, as you know, that he really wants to sit down with Mueller. He has nothing to hide. He wants to answer all of Mueller's questions. It's his lawyers, you know, at this point that won't let him, and they're trying to negotiate. The response you got from the president tonight, though, on that, it seems like it was different. What did he say?
Well, he wouldn't say specifically whether he would do an interview. And in fact, we sort of thought maybe that would be the next natural place for him to go after saying what he did. But he didn't comment on that specifically. What he did comment on is we asked him about Rudy Giuliani's comments about a potential interview being a perjury trap. And he said he agreed that it could potentially be a perjury trap. He might say something that would not align with what James Comey had said. And then he believes that Robert Mueller would potentially believe James Comey instead of him, and then that would be a problem.
So also when it comes to Russia and actual action against Russia, right? I mean, we all know what the president's rhetoric on Russia has been and continues to be, but he in the White House asserts, look at the sanctions, look how tough this administration has been on Russia. But tonight he spoke about potentially lifting sanctions on Russia. What did he say?
So we asked him about that. We asked him about the controversy surrounding his meeting with President Putin in Helsinki and whether or not Putin had asked for the United States to lift those sanctions. And he said, we're not going to lift those sanctions unless we get something in return. And then he went on to say that, which is absolutely true, that the United States and Russia need to and are working on a lot of different things together, including Syria. So the implication was if you scratch my back, maybe I'll scratch yours. But on bigger sort of geopolitical things that the United States is pushing Moscow to do.
I mean, did he lay out what, for example, Putin's regime would have to do in Syria, would have to do regarding Ukraine for you know, the U.S. to lift sanctions?
No, and it's a good question. We didn't get more details about what he would do or what he would envision. But that's sort of the conditions that he suggested would be necessary broadly for that to happen.
All right. Really important reporting tonight, Jeff Mason. Thank you for getting the interview. Thank you for hustling over to the camera. I think you just sat down about 30 seconds before we went to air. We appreciate the hustle.
My pleasure.
Thanks for being out front tonight. All right, let's talk more about this. Solomon Weisenberg is with me, former Deputy Independent Counsel in the Whitewater investigation. Laura Coates joins us, former federal prosecutor, and Patrick Healy, politics editor for the New York Times, is here. A lot of news to digest tonight, so let's begin with the headline. Solomon, to you. The president saying to Jeff Mason and his colleagues at Reuters that he could run the Mueller probe. He could run the Russia investigation into him and his associates if he wanted to. Your reaction?
Oh, my reaction is that it's a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. It's no different than a lot of outrageous things he said. We all know he's not going to run the Mueller investigation. He just wants to divert everybody's attention or get the media talking about it. At some point, he'll make a decision whether or not he wants to fire Mueller. Or attempt to, and we'll face the consequences of that. But he's not going to run the investigation. I think it's just silly, ridiculous comment.
So, Laura, his tone and his language has changed when it comes to the question that Jeff Mason asked him about whether he will sit for an interview with Mueller, right? It has consistently been, I want to, right? It's up to my lawyers, but I want to. Now he's echoing Giuliani, using the same language, saying, look, this could be a perjury trap. And he essentially said it would be my word against James Comey, the former FBI director's word. And I'm paraphrasing here, but here's a quote from the president where he said, quote, to Jeff Mason, even if I'm telling the truth, that makes me a liar. Fair concern?
Well, I think he's done playing the good cop, bad cop, which you all know is kind of a ruse to show that both of you are going to be the bad cops here, and you want to have an optics argument to make here. I think it's very clear that he is concerned that there is already testimony that has been given to Robert Mueller and his team that is going to corroborate other people's versions or alternative facts that he may talk about. And he's concerned, I think rightfully so, that a statement that he may make that may be disingenuous or outright wrong and deceitful will not be able to be corroborated by existing testimony they have. Now, having said that, that does not mean that every single time somebody sits before an investigator, that they themselves do not run the same risk of perhaps there being other information that's out there that would contradict them. So for the President of the United States, the head of the executive branch, under which is this investigatory team, to say he can't be bothered asking questions because he might see something that's wrong or disingenuous is laughable.
Patrick, Jeff Mason, the Reuters team, rightly brought up the question of security clearances, right? Because the president just revoked John Brennan's security clearance. And the president didn't say, no, I have no reason to do that. He essentially said, well, I haven't given it much thought. Now, the big difference between John Brennan and Bob Mueller, and there are a number, is that John Brennan's been all over the airwaves criticizing the president, calling his actions tantamount to treason. Mueller hasn't said a peep.
Right. Robert Mueller has not been divulging classified information or doing anything, nor was John Brennan. Nor was Brennan. But there are no grounds under under rules for security clearances why the president would be revoking it, except for vindictiveness, punishment, an attempt to derail the special counsel investigation. But this is Trump going to his bag of tricks. I mean, he is used to decades of controlling and running his business empire, telling his underlings and lieutenants exactly what they should and shouldn't do, basically bossing people around. He has been so bothered from the get-go that he has not been able to control the Mueller investigation, Jeff Sessions, Rod Rosenstein. So this is he's now basically found his weapon, which is revoking security clearances. But the notion that he would use that, as in any sort of credible way as a threat against Mueller is pretty ridiculous.
So, Solomon, I mean, going to what was the lead story until about 20 minutes ago when this Reuters report broke, and of course that is that the president was truly caught off guard, so off guard by his own White House counsel. You were White House counsel during Whitewater. The president didn't know that McGahn did these 3 days, 30 hours of interviews with Mueller's team. He also didn't know that his own personal lawyers didn't get a full debriefing whatsoever about what McGahn said. How shocking is that to you?
Well, there are a lot of strands there. First of all, I wasn't the White House counsel. I was deputy independent counsel. I was up against the White House counsel.
There you go. Thank you for clarifying.
And President Clinton's deputy White House counsel, Bruce Lindsay, didn't come in and talk to us for 30 hours. That would have been great. I would have died for that. We had to take him into court and defeat his spurious claims of attorney-client privilege. So I think it's very significant that the president and his original legal team let Don McGahn go in. And to me, it's a sign that they didn't feel they had anything to fear. But keep in mind, back when John Dowd and Ty Cobb made this decision, obviously in consultation with the president, they were looking at the Mueller probe as primarily about a conspiracy with the Russians and members of the campaign to affect the election or to hack computers. It's now clear that Bob Mueller is focused much more on obstruction of justice and that Mueller has a very broad view of obstruction. And I would be very worried and very scared to go in and talk to Bob Mueller. And keep in mind, Bob Mueller's people have indicted 4 people for lying to Bob Mueller, to lying to his investigators, 4 people. So if he wasn't the president, let's put it this way, any white-collar attorney in D.C. would tell you you would be crazy to let your client go in and talk to the prosecutors under these set of facts.
And Laura, I think one of the reasons that that Solomon is noting this, that it was really a lens of collusion at that point and not an obstruction lens they were looking through. Let's remember the role that Don McGahn played in protecting Mueller, if you will. When the president, the New York Times reported, wanted to fire Mueller, McGahn said, "You do that, I'll quit, I'll walk out." So he has, you know, obviously talked to Mueller's team about the questions surrounding the desire of the president to fire Mueller.
Absolutely, and I think Don McGahn has done an artful way of trying to show that he is the one transparent last line of defense in the White House. And whether that's entirely true, Poppy, in the end, I guess we don't know, but 30 hours is a long time to talk to the investigators. And if the focal point of Robert Mueller's entire probe was on obstruction, I would be shocked. Obstruction is almost never the focal point. It happens to be one that's a tangential claim that can be added on, but the real meat of the matter is what it is you'd like me to stop investigating and why you want my attention to be diverted. So I suspect the overwhelming amount of information that McGahn spoke to him about was probably in line with, one, he has no attorney-client privilege to protect the conversation. Right. He could, I assume, talk about executive privilege if that could be retroactively applied, which it can't be in this case. But also remember, Don McGahn is a campaign finance expert, was once on the FEC as a commissioner. And so he probably has information and insight to the role he played on the campaign and about whether there was any in-kind contributions, which I'm sure are of interest to Mueller's team.
Sure, which also would tie back perhaps to Michael Cohen if we see more play out there. And again, the executive privilege wouldn't cover, if there was, the time that he was on the campaign, right?
Precisely.
Before he was in the White House. Quickly, Patrick, when you look at this big picture.
Well, in the transitional period, sorry to interrupt, but
no,
in the transitional period, there is some protection.
Okay, fair.
Yeah,
An important point and nuance there.